All right. I think we are ready to go. So, Roy, it's a pleasure working with you, and thank you for being with us again. So, take it away.
Well, my grandson sometimes describes me as a latter-day Luddite, and clearly I am when it comes to technology. So I want to take this opportunity to recognize Julianne, who is leaving us soon, and to say that I could not have given any of these esoteric talks without her help over the last 8 years. So I'm going to miss her terribly. I'm looking forward to working with Pam. Um, and with that, I want to share with you my experience over 60 years with two idiosyncratic geniuses who have interested me and have had a lot to do with my travels in search of the product of this genius. Fine. So how do I advance it again? Well, this one. Okay. So the first is Giovanni Battista Piranesi, uh, who is on the left and who was born in Venice in 1720 and who died in Rome in 1778 at the age of 58. The second is Sir John Soane on the right, an Englishman born in 1753 and who died in 1837, a long life of 83 years, which spanned parts of 2 centuries and which overlapped Piranesi's life by, I think, 25 years. Well, each became an architect. Piranesi's father was a stonemason, Soane's a bricklayer, a common route which perhaps inspired their common choice of a profession. And I first became seriously interested in Piranesi when in 1960 I bought three of his original prints done from his etchings, um, prints of ancient Rome landmarks, and I bought these from a dealer in New Orleans. And I lived with them until I moved to Oak Hammock when, as part of my downsizing, I donated the three to the Harn. And not many years before, the Harn had staged a major exhibition of Piranesi's prints, which some or many of you may have seen. Well, I first met Sir John Soane in 1970 when I visited the house, when I visited the house and studio that he bequeathed to the British nation, uh, and a bequest that was unsuccessfully contested by a really nasty son. Uh, in bequeathing it, along with all the contents, he also required that no entry fee ever be charged, and indeed there is no entry fee, uh, which is pretty remarkable in today's world. Uh, the the house is unique uh, with a location overlooking Lincoln's Inn Fields and not very far from the British Museum. Over the years, I've been back to Sir John Soane's museum often, returned to introduce grandchildren and later great grandchildren. Uh, my most recent visit, and I'm sure my last, occurred on September the 24th, 2019, when the then director, an American, Bruce Boucher, invited my small group of Palladio and England seekers for a wine evening at the museum. And incidentally, Bruce retired December the 31st of 2023 and I don't know the new director. Um, it was one of my long life's most memorable evenings. We were welcomed by Bruce um, here in the combined dining room library. We're given wine and told that we could wander this quirky uh, building at will. Now, the color combination here is striking, I think, and this is based on a paint chip that Sohn brought back from Pompeii on his 2-year grand tour. Um, and it's really a very comfortable room, as indeed the whole house is. Um, the other many of the other quirky rooms I'm going to describe a little later. This is the wall at Pompeii on which those colors are based. Well, the exterior facade is often described as Georgian in style, which means it was built during the reigns of the four Georges, which began in 1714 and lasted until 1830. But the Georgian style is highly variable. Um, its common uh, coin is symmetry and proportion based on the classical architecture of Greece and Rome as reinterpreted or revised in Renaissance Italy. And here, the museum's facade is comprised of a row of three earlier houses bought at three separate times, each demolished and rebuilt to create this today's ensemble. Uh, the center portion um, is the is number 13, Lincoln's Inn Fields, and it's uniquely Sohn. Surmounting the angles of the projecting portion of the second floor level are two terracotta figures, which are copies of the caryatids found in the portico of the Erechtheum in Athens on the Acropolis. And incidentally, those are now all relocated in well, to me, still new Acropolis Museum, which opened in 2009. And what you see at the Erechtheum today are copies. Uh, the four corbels that you see there, Gothic corbels attached to the piers, were recycled from below niches in the north front of Westminster Hall and are actually from the period of Richard III in the 14th century. Um, and Sohn had uh, been hired to undertake alterations of Westminster Hall, which he did between 1824 and 1827. And apparently, he simply took those home, later used them on the facade of the central house. And interestingly, not too long after his work, the Great Fire of 1834 completely destroyed Westminster Hall. And so these are the only fragments that remain. Of course, it was after that the decision was made to design present Westminster in the Gothic Revival style. The great battle as to what style it was going to be. Uh, but I felt as if art and use of John Sohn, thanks to Yale architectural historian Vincent Scully, whose course on modern architecture I audited in 1962 while attending the Yale Law School. Scully postulated that there are no virgin births in architecture, pointing out the precedents influencing America's postmodern architects, um, among whom were Philip Johnson, Richard Meyer, who designed the Art Museum in Atlanta, among other things, Louis Kahn, known for his medical building at the University of Pennsylvania, and the Mellon Gallery, not the Mellon Gallery, what's it called? The British Gallery at Yale, um, and Michael Graves, as well as the designing couple, Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown. Each of these uh, prominent postmodern architects acknowledged Sir John Soane as a major influencer. And in fact, there is a DVD on, on precisely that, very interesting one. Well, Philip Johnson, for example, that's with the caryatid, obviously, those are the caryatids in place originally. Corbels. The Philip Johnson, for example, attributed the design of his Connecticut brick house, which you're seeing here, um, built contemporaneously with his more famous, lost one, contemporaneous with his more famous glass house, uh, to the breakfast room here at Sir John Soane's home in number 13. The feature in common is, if you look toward the bed there, the feature in common is the handkerchief ceiling, sometimes called a pendentive dome, and the indirect light that it produces. Here we have the breakfast room, and incidentally, he enhances the light in that room by having over 100 mirrors in the room. You can see some of them, but they're everywhere. Some not easily seen. Well, another example, I'm going backwards. Another example um, of this influence is the American architects Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown's uh, design for the Sainsbury wing at the National Gallery in London. I'm sure many of you have visited it. It was opened by Queen Elizabeth II, I believe, in 1991. But Venturi and his wife, Denise Scott Brown, uh, called its interior design an homage to that and this is their design at the Sainsbury wing, and they call it an homage to that of Sir John Soane's 1811 Dulwich Picture Gallery, which was England's first purpose-built public art gallery. Both illustrations speak to Soane's characterization as the architect of light, and the intricate use of skylights in particular. He was an innovator. Um, Again, we've seen his breakfast room and the way he enhanced the light there. Again, it's one of the most influential rooms architecturally in the world, probably. Uh, Here is the Dulwich Picture Gallery. Um, Again, going back to what Venturi and Scott Brown did at the Sainsbury. Well, it was also Vincent Scully who sent me to Paestum for the first time in 1964. While the name Pompeii tripped easily off my tongue, and in fact I had visited it during my Navy days in 1957, and Herculaneum tripped a little more easily off my tongue. Paestum did not trip off my tongue at all in 1962 when I was in the classroom of Vincent Scully. But Scully described its three buildings as the best preserved examples of the archaic version of the Greek Doric order, all built between 550 and 450 CE, BCE, and predating the classical version, which is today's Parthenon, which replaces an older temple of Athena, which was demolished in the Persian invasion of 480 BCE. And incidentally, I'm trying hard to move into um, the new archaeological world and use BCE and CE rather than BC and AD. So bear with me if I trip up. But these were definitely BCE. I was challenged. I was often challenged by Scully. In fact, he sent me to a number of places around the world, including Nîmes in France and to Crete. Uh, but I had to see Paestum with my own eyes. And on a Sunday in May in 1964, a cousin and I drove from Sorrento along the Amalfi Coast to Paestum. And although I have been to Paestum twice since on archaeological tours, it's that first version or that first vision that I saw in 1964 that remains unforgettable. Uh, and we really should be seeing all three of the buildings. One of them is cropped out here, but simply a stunning sight. And as Robert Dean was mentioning on my way in, um, it was abandoned primarily because of became kind of a malarial swamp around there, and so people left some hundreds of years after these were constructed between 550 and 450 BCE. Um, well, in 1964, Paestum in no way connected Piranesi and Soane in my mind. That intersection of two geniuses came in 1970 with my first visit to the picture room of Sir John Soane. And what one sees in Piranesi's wash drawings of Paestum prepares us for the Parthenon and the classical period it represents. Um, the Doric structures at Paestum, Scully pointed out, are allegorical. Um, they're detail captured by Piranesi. If I had not attended Scully's lecture, I would never, in my wildest dreams, have thought of these as being allegorical. And I guess that's why Yale professors get paid so much as for uh, fresh, fresh insights. In fact, the only classroom I've ever been in all of the years of my being in classrooms, in which students broke into spontaneous applause at such insights with Scully's. It was an incredibly exciting experience to be in his classroom. Well, he said that with respect to these temples, that for the Greeks, the simple Doric columns, which originally were wood, but by the time of Paestum were uh, drums carved of stone with mortise and tenon stability against earthquakes, that all of these columns represented for the Greeks what they called the sacred grove. Uh, the bulging of Paestum's columns represented the weight of individual responsibility, uh, more frequently referred to as entasis, which was never used by the Romans. But the columns themselves represented the human figure, and in the Doric order, only the figure of males. Later, in the Ionic order, the more slender columns represent the female. The entablature above the columns we see here represents a society weighing down the individual. So would you ever have thought about that? if you'd driven up to these temples. Uh, but before describing that mind-blowing experience in Soane's picture room, I want to talk further about Piranesi. Although his father was only a stonemason, his family was anything but uneducated. Uh, his older brother, Andrea, introduced him to Latin literature and the ancient Greco-Roman civilization. Later, he was apprenticed under an uncle who was a leading Venetian architect in the state organization responsible for engineering and restoring historic buildings. And then by 1740, he was in Rome working as a draftsman for Venice's ambassador to the new Pope Benedict XIV. He lived in the Palazzo Venezia and studied the art of etching and engraving. Um, and at that point, etching was indeed, uh, etching and engraving were recognized as an art form. Prior to Dürer, and you're familiar with Dürer, I'm sure, German, from 1471 to 1528. Well, it was Dürer who raised the ancient uh, idea, or not idea, but the form of printmaking to an art. Again, prior to Dürer and his incredible etchings, this was really not considered an art form. So um, it's always interested me that any description of Piranesi refers to him first and foremost as an architect rather than an artist and antiquarian. But the truth of the matter is, he had only one architectural commission in his entire life. In 1764, one of the Pope's nephews appointed him to restore the church of Santa Maria del Curato in the Villa of the Knights of Malta on Rome's Aventine Hill. Uh, and here you see uh, elements he combined, classical architectural elements, trophies, escutcheons. Uh, this was very much a product of his imagination. Um, and the courtyard outside um, of the church also shows that imaginative use of traditional classical features. The altar inside is wildly Baroque. Um, it could define Baroque, really, but um, the, um, the entire church creation is remarkable. Again, it's called a restoration, but I think it's really a reconstruction, all done by Piranesi. So this was his one architectural uh, creation that was actually built, um, and uh, the church uh, is basically unknown. Um, it it's been granted. I'm trying to think what the right word would be, but its own territorial status by Italy, as has the Vatican, and so it's not something that the public sees. Um, it is famous for one thing, and this is the view through the keyhole, um, which is found within the huge set of wooden gates, green gates in the entrance to the villa, which was also designed by, um, back up there, which was also designed by Piranesi. Um, and tourists do go to stand in front of the keyhole and take that photograph. Uh, but again, it's simply not known, the church, generally because it's never open to the public. But in 1994, I read in some obscure publication that one actually could visit the villa of the Knights of Malta by a special permit to be obtained at the Orders Magistral Palace, and it's just about a block and a half down the Via Condotti from the Spanish Steps, which I'm sure you all would recognize that location. And as it happened, I was to be in Rome a few weeks later on my way to Sicily. So when I reached my favorite Rome hotel, the Locarno, the desk clerk called the Magistral Palace and made an appointment for me. So, with permit finally in hand and advised to take a taxi to the villa, uh, I found myself the only visitor free to visit Piranese's only built work of architecture. My visit to the church completed, the porter who had admitted me accompanied me on a walk around the very formal garden. Obviously, he didn't trust me. He was accompanied by two, what to me were attacked German police dogs, uh, and and an evil eye. Um, and even when I gave him 1,000 lira tip, I got no grazie. Uh, but but my mission had been accomplished. I had seen the only built work of Piranesi. Well, unlike his sparse architectural output, as an artist, his output was prodigious. He created about 2,000 plates in his lifetime. Um, the more uh, drawings from which the plates were made, or etchings were done, and then the plates were made. Much of his work was first developed in these vigorous ink and wash drawings, which were then reduced to etchings and then to prints. Because Piranesi possessed an extremely retentive visual memory, his preparatory drawings typically are unfinished, leaving details to be added during the etching process. Well, contrary to Piranesi's normal practice, uh, the preparatory ink and wash drawings for Paestum um, were unusually detailed and approximately the same size as the published prints. This is attributed to Piranesi's awareness of his mortality and the strong likelihood of having to hand over the unfinished work to his son Francesco, who clearly lacked his father's uh, retentive visual memory. Piranesi guessed right because Piranesi died shortly after he completed the drawings and was back in Rome. And the prints were published posthumously in late 1778. Um, Here are some of the drawings. Again, much more detailed than usual, including figures shown here. You can see how heavy the columns here, and I think you can even see the entasis. Well, someone's visit, his own visit to Paestum, occurred in March 1779. Again, not too long after Piranesi's death, but it led to a very surprising creation in 1798. Wrong direction. Which he labeled Barn alla Pestum. Uh, it had been done, it was done for a client with whom he had traveled in Italy and Sicily. And this is unfortunate. This was on a large estate, Malvern Hall, in Warwickshire. Um, Unfortunately, it's now on a modern road, so it has lost its context. But can you envision a cow emerging from this elegant little Greek temple? Uh, Again, the building is still there, uh, although again compromised contextually. But there was no question about it because Soane himself labeled it barn alla Pestum. Uh, so clearly, Pestum had an influence on him. Um, but Soane's uh, architectural career uh, had really taken off in 1788 when he was approached by the architect for the Bank of England, was appointed the architect for the Bank of England. And this was a commission that lasted for 45 years. Uh, I think the site in London was over 2 acres. And so over time, he kept expanding and expanding. And it was a remarkable commission and required a lot of ingenuity. Uh, the bank, at the time he started this work, had just moved from an earlier location. And indeed, at that earlier location, um, unhappy Londoners had broken into the bank, stolen money. So this new commission, um, again, which eventually occupied a whole block, actually had no, well, it had a wall around it, and so no one was looking into it. And so it basically is a series of buildings with a lot of courtyards, inner courtyards, which provided the light. Um, and this is considered Soane's masterpiece, or one of his two masterpieces. And it was demolished beginning in the 1920s and is considered one of London's greatest architectural losses. And just um, yesterday, I received a copy of an article that appeared in Saturday's Spectator magazine, headlined, "Forget Monetary Policy, comma, the Bank of England's greatest crime was architectural." And it is entirely about Soane's creation there over time, um, and about the tragedy of its loss. So this, ironically, um, in 1830 was painted uh, was painted by Joseph Gandy, who was the artist and collaborator of Soane. Um, painted this Bank of England as a ruin, uh, reflecting both Gandy's and Soane's fascination with Roman ruins and Piranesi's etchings. It's today in the collection of the Soane Museum, although it is, at least it was not in 2019, currently being exhibited. So Stone had again been successful through very hard work, and born the son of a bricklayer. But midway through his 45 years of work on the Bank of England, he created a second masterpiece. And I see Richard Jones sitting there, and I know he has recently visited this Dulwich Picture Gallery. And midway through Soane's 45 years of work on the Bank of England, he created this masterpiece. The architectural plans for the gallery were approved in 1811, and the gallery opened to the public as Britain's first purpose-built art gallery in 1817. And if you're going to be in London and have never been there, you can take the train from Victoria Station. It's about 20 minutes, and you get off and walk through a beautiful park to the Dulwich, which is a real treat. Well, the creation story behind the collection the gallery was to exhibit is too delicious not to share. You couldn't make this stuff up. In 1764, Catherine the Great of Russia placed a favored lover, Stanislaus Poniatowski, on the Polish throne, and he determined that any respectable king needed a royal art collection. So end, toward this end in 1790, he commissioned an art dealership in London to assemble a collection of old masters, which my legal pads. Later, over the next 5 years, the art dealership's owners, a Swiss named Francis Bourgeois and a Frenchman named Noel des Enfants, toured Europe buying fine art for the Polish king's royal collection. And it was a stunning collection with gems from the Dutch, the three Rembrandts, the English, the Flemish, including 10 Rubens, French, including 6 Poussins, the Italian, Raphael, Tiepolo, Veronese, and the Spanish schools. Now, of all these, another view of the exterior, I have gotten out of order somehow. Anyway, we'll come back to it. Sadly for the dealers, in 1795, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was partitioned and no longer, and Poland no longer existed. And it's rumored that the deposed king of Poland was no longer satisfying Catherine the Great's sexual needs. I think this has to be wrong because she died the next year in 1796, and I don't know what her sexual needs were near the end, but this sounds like too much. Well, the dealers, left with this huge collection of old masters, decided to hold an auction uh, to dispose of them. Well, ironically, the time set for the auction coincided exactly with the first hot air balloon ascent in London, and no one came to the auction. Everybody went to see the hot air balloon ascent. Well, with the death of Des Enfants in 1807, Bourgeois inherited the entire collection. And when Bourgeois died in 1811, he bequeathed the collection to Dulwich College and left instructions in his will for the construction of a gallery in Dulwich to be designed by his friend Sir John Soane, in which to display the collection. So when I first saw the building, um, and I think this was probably 30 years ago, um, I, I, uh, I was struck by its simplicity, with its uninterrupted raw brick and the lack of decoration or ornamentation. Uh, Frankly, it looked postmodern. Uh, but here's the very simple entrance. And above, you can see the skylights, which again were hallmarks of Soane's genius. So it was during uh, and again, you see the light here. It was during the construction of the Dulwich Picture Gallery that Soane suffered the devastating loss of his wife, Eliza, on a November afternoon in 1815. Well, Eliza had foretold her own death a month earlier after the Soanes' surviving son, George, published two anonymous, scurrilous articles viciously attacking his father's architecture. Eliza had exclaimed, "These are George's doings. He has given me my death blow. I shall never hold up my head again." And indeed, a month later, she died. Well, indirectly, Eliza's death resulted in a British icon known by everyone here, the ubiquitous red phone booth. In 1816, oh, this is the Rembrandt that I wanted to show you. This is basically comparable to the Louvre's Mona Lisa. This is my favorite Rembrandt, as she looks with a what? A smile or something out the window. Well, this is a model which is in that dining room library um, at the Soane House and Museum, the room with the Pompeian red and green trim. Um, Sir John designed a family tomb, and here it is in the flesh. A family tomb, which is in Old St. Pancras churchyard. And I set out to find it, and I didn't understand British English, and I thought he said Old St. Patrick's. And I wandered around the area where the new British, no longer new, but new British Library is, because he said it would be immediately recognizable, the church. Well, I finally took refuge in the new British Library, that an extraordinary collection, basically a Scandinavian or Stockholm building made of brick. And the reference librarian quickly told me that it was just up the street at St. Pancras. So, um, in in 1924, Sir Giles Gilbert Scott took the red K2 telephone booth from the family tomb in Old St. Pancras. Now, this particular um, image I took um, about 3 years ago when going to visit Falling Water again, Frank Lloyd Wright's house in Pennsylvania. Well, near Falling Water is a second Frank Lloyd Wright home called Kentuck Knob. Don't know whether, I think, Richard, you've been there. Maybe others have. And it belongs to Baron Peter Colombo, a British baron who very prominent in the arts in Britain. But he also collected houses by famous contemporary architects. And in addition to Kentuck Knob, he did own the Mies van der Rohe house in Illinois that now belongs to the National Trust. I think they had an auction, telephone auction. They bid $6 million for it, and he moved his sculptures that were on the grounds there to Kentuck Knob. In any event, he has placed three of the telephone booths at Kentuck Knob as a sculpture. Uh, so just another influence of Sir John Soane that most people don't know about. Well, to wrap up the intersection of these two geniuses, Piranesi and Soane, I returned to Sir John Soane's uh, home and his famous picture room. Uh, This was Soane's last major construction project at the museum, which was done in 1823 after purchasing the third of the three adjoining residences overlooking Lincoln's Inn Fields. And the picture room was actually an extension of the central building, Building 13, over the stable block of the building at number 14. Well, here, Soane created my nominee for the world's single most exciting art space. Within a small 13-foot by 12-foot room, uh, and using moving what he called picture panels, or uh, he hung 118 of his most treasured paintings. Facing the visitor upon entry are three Canalettos, the largest, titled Riva della Schiavone, is considered one of the painter's finest works. And then on the left wall, the north wall, you see two of William Hogarth's famous series paintings. Um, the 8-part A Rake's Progress and the 4-part An Election. Um, and Hogarth, of course, is famous for these series paintings depicting what he called modern moral subjects. They're filled with dark humor and bawdy satire. Um, well, it's the moving panels on the right or the south side, close up of one of the Rake's Progress paintings by Hogarth. But it's on this wall with the moving panels, and here you can see how low tech the visit is. Uh, 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 One of the men, I guess we could call him a guard, comes in with white gloves and starts opening up the panels. Uh, Again, how low tech can you get? Uh, but on those panels are 15 of the surviving ink and wash drawings in which Piranesi depicted the three ruined temples of Paestum. Um, Now, there were originally 21, and when uh, Soane was on his grand tour, which lasted about 2 years, again while he was at the art school in London, uh, he had done very well, and he received a scholarship which permitted him to make the grand tour. And when in Rome, and shortly before Piranesi's death, he had gone to Piranesi's studio, and he saw the 21 ink and wash drawings. Uh, so uh, in the interval between the death of Piranesi and his son's sale of the original wash drawings, uh, nowhere can I find, and I don't think anybody will ever know just what happened to the drawings. But eventually they were published by um, a man of wealth in London. And in 1817, I think, they came up for auction in London, and Soane purchased 15 of the 21 for 14 and a half pounds. Um, a 16th is in the museum in Amsterdam. A 17th is in the Louvre. But again, 15 of the 21 are now here um, in the picture room at Sir John Soane's. And um, if you go there today, what you actually will see are facsimiles. Um, in the original frames. About 8 years ago, the originals were moved to the research space in the basement of the song. But believe me, you won't be able to tell the difference. So this was clearly Soames' homage to Piranesi, a person who influenced him and whom he admired. And um, I think that this is an appropriate way to end the talk. Uh, my homage to these two geniuses whom I have followed for 60 years. So thank you.
You can see, let me see. You can see the vast humanities education that I've had over the last 8 years working with Roy. Thank you, Roy, as always. Okay. We have new lights. Let me get our lights back on here.
Let me tell you that my next talk is going to be a lot lighter. It's going to be a lot of gossip about the William Faulkner family, taking as a point of departure his time in New Orleans in 1925. It's going to be a lot of fun if you like gossip.
And I got to work on that one with him too. Any questions? We'll have Pam walk with the microphone. Remember to speak into the microphone. And then here on Zoom, if you have any questions, raise your hands.
Roy, thank you for that intriguing talk. I'm remembering when I went to Pesta many, many years ago, I was so struck by how flat the landscape is that the temples stand in. And it occurred to me, hearing you describe the Scully allegory view of the Doric temple, that flatness of the landscape adds to the weighing down of on humanity. So I was just interested in that, hearing about that allegory. Thanks.
Well, thank you, because your comment is certainly in the same category with Scully's observation. So it's great that you came to Okama to share your knowledge with us.
Any other questions?
Well, I'm exhausted. So go and do good.
Thank you again, Roy. Priceless.